Did you know the Kokunski story at all? Had you heard anything about it before you were handed the script?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first, I'm friends with Ariel Vroman. We were friends prior to this movie, and I ran into him out one night, and he said he was doing this movie called The Iceman, and I said, "Oh, the HBO documentary," and he said, "Yeah." I was fully aware of it. I thought it was a fantastic documentary.
Yeah, and in the story, what are the appealing aspects of the story to you? Because I know what I took away from it and what I found really interesting, but tell me what grabbed you about it.
Well, I think it's a strange dichotomy having a man who is so ruthless, so violent, such a sociopath, able to kind of spend his days taking lives and then go home to a wife and children and be a loving father and husband.
And for your character, the interesting thing here is, and I haven't seen the documentary or read the book, and but you run your hitman killing enterprise out of the back of a ice cream truck, and there's an interesting scene in the movie where we actually see you selling ice cream. I thought, okay, well, this is just a front. Did that happen in real life? Did he actually sell ice cream?
Oh yeah. His name was Mr. Softy. Technically, we couldn't use Mr. Softy. There was some rights issues, but
sure, yeah.
But yeah, he had an ice cream truck. He kept bodies in the truck. So I mean, there's plenty of little kids out there, I'm sure, who bought ice cream, and that ice cream was freezing next to a corpse.
That's the weirdest thing anyone said to me during the film festival so far.
Yeah, it's sad but true.
Yeah. And what kind of research did you do? Because this is, I think, for my money, a much different kind of performance than we've seen from you before. What was it about this character that really kind of, I don't know, freed you up in a way?
Well, that's just it. There is such a freedom to the role, you know. There's very little online about who he was as a man. Despite the fact it's a true story, there's not much you can do in terms of research about what he looked like, how he was, who he was. Well, they knew he had military training. They knew he was a demolitions expert. They knew that he understood bombs and explosives. But outside of that, there really wasn't much to go on the guy, other than the fact that Kuklinski himself would say that he thought Prangi was sick. You know, so you have this raving sociopath calling another man sick. So you have to think, okay, this guy obviously has to be gone. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of freedom there, and it really was just a matter of, when you think about playing an evil character or a sociopath, no villain thinks they're a villain.
That's right. Yeah.
They don't think I'm the bad guy. So you can't approach it thinking you're bad. You just have to approach it. What part of our brains stop us from doing those things? And I might be revealing too much, but on a daily basis, I can't tell you how many times I think, what if I just did this right now?
Yeah.
What if I just did this? Jerked the wheel in traffic, or just walked off this building, or just crazy things. And on a daily basis, your brain tells you what not to do. So you start to think, well, I'd have to imagine for a real sociopath, that voice holds no water in their brain and in their conscience. So you kind of just start liberating yourself of all, restraint. And it starts being really fun. You come to set and you just kind of think, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to say whatever I want to say, act however I want to act, and what type of person will come out of that? How would that person just interact? Because the truth is, the majority of the film, I'm not always killing. A lot of times I'm just speaking, just kind of existing, just being a man. Yeah. So when that guy's not actually in the act of murder, what type of guy is he? What type of man just is completely free? Completely chained by the expectations of society, and it started to become almost like a drug. It's fun. It's an addiction. You have a hard time letting it go at the end of the day. It's so liberating.
Huh. Well, it's interesting. One scene in particular, I don't know why this little moment grabbed me so much, but it's in the disco, in the club, and you guys are trying to blend in. You're there to do a job, and we won't give away what it is, but you're there to do a job, and you're trying to blend in, and you do this weird little dance when you come through. And I thought, okay, this is maybe the first time this guy has ever danced before. Maybe, I don't know, but he's not a regular at this club. But he's trying to fit in, and this is his idea of how he's going to fit in. And the dance I just thought was so kind of funny and goofy, but kind of like it was. For me, it said a lot about the character with no words. I learned about the character by watching that weird little arm movement that you do.
Yeah, well, I liked that moment in the dance. I kind of thought these are those fun little moments that you can kind of try and make iconic and just think, well, is there a way I can do something really unique and strange that will just fit? You know, sometimes there are just those moments that just kind of like, that just worked. And I think he is kind of out of place in that dance. And, you know, his whole look is just so off-putting. And you think if this guy starts kind of disco dancing there to murder somebody, it's a strange dichotomy. And it could really be interesting. So I think I did a few different dances. I'm not quite sure which one made the cut, but
it's an arm kind of swivel or something. I'm not sure. But it's interesting because in that particular scene, you've got a guy in a room full of people, and clearly I got the idea that he's not comfortable around people, and that's why he's very comfortable killing them, because he doesn't like people very much. But he's got to try and fit in, and it was his idea of what people do when they're socializing. You know,
exactly, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's just it. You know, it's. I think to be a sociopath, you have to be a social outcast, but probably pretty brilliant. You know, you have to have a very functioning mind, but just detached from the social norms and restraints that other people are bound by. So it's. Again, this strange balance of being kind of disconnected but very tuned in.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about working with Michael Shannon. He's such a terrific actor, and someone who I think in this movie, you know, he's got that kind of face where he looks like the everyman from this angle, and then he turns just like this, and all of a sudden it's a completely different thing.
Terror.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about working with him, because I've met him once and I found him intimidating, but that's just me. Tell me what you thought.
Oh, you're not alone. I mean, he's a different guy on set and off set. You know, when he's on set, he's in his zone. He's focused. He's really committed to his craft, and it's inspiring. You know, you get him off set, and he's a cupcake, nicest guy in the world, laughing, joking, having a bottle of wine. But when he's there to work, you know, he's there to give all of himself, and it kind of that commitment, that kind of uncompromising approach to his craft, it just kind of breeds allegiance, and you think, yeah, let's go that way. Good work.
Well, you guys have a rapport, and it's hard to describe the relation. The relationship in the film is two kind of like-minded people. There's a difference because your character, Prange, doesn't care about other people, even his kid. You see how he treats his kid at one point, whereas Kokinski does. He loves his family, just as everyone else he doesn't care so much about. And but I also, like, I guess for Prange, I got the idea that and maybe why Kokinski doesn't respect him particularly is that he enjoys the work too much.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for Kokinski, the first time we see him kill someone, it's out of revenge. He's angry. Well, he's not angry. Actually, he's icy. But he's been slighted, so he takes care of it in a way. But your character, it seems to me that it doesn't matter whether it's a 14-year-old girl or a busload of senior citizens. It doesn't. It's just a job for him, and he seems to get something out of it that Kokinski doesn't. But you guys form a relationship.
Yeah.
Somehow finding, I guess, a middle ground. But it's a relationship born out of desperation, I guess. You know.
Yeah, well, they say in the book even that Kuklinski thought that this guy took too much pleasure in the work, that he actually would torture people. You know, a lot of times, I think there was one story in the book where Prange had tied someone up and let rats eat him to death. You know, kind of tied the guy up and covered the guy in something, and rats, you know, devoured this person. And it was just a slow death, and he had videotaped it and kind of just watched it back. You know, it was a true sociopath, and you're right, he enjoyed it a little too much, and I think that's where Kuklinski lost respect, and that's where the disconnect began. That's where their rift kind of started.
I'm glad that scene's not in the movie.
Me too.
Yeah. Is there stuff, like, did you talk to anyone? Does Prange have relatives? Is there anything? I mean, there's little known about him because he lived in the shadows, but was there anyone to speak to, or did you speak to go to jails and speak to psychopaths or anything? Or?
No. I mean, I came in really at the 11th hour. I remember getting this phone call, weeks before we started shooting, just Ariel saying, "Listen, James Franco fell out. Can you help me out?" So I mean, I literally, from the time I accepted the role, I was in Louisiana the next week, filming. So it was kind of a quick process. But there really wasn't too much to find online about who Prange was and how he lived and who knew him as a man.
Do you think that the how quick it was changed the kind of performance? Because you have another character that you've played a couple of times. We're not going to talk about that, but that's something you think a great deal about. You give that kind of performance. This seems different, and I think maybe it's because it's just all instinct. It maybe because of the rapidity of how fast it happened, that maybe you just had to kind of go, you know what, I'm throwing the cards in the air and seeing where they land here.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. There's something about, I think, a sociopath mentality that is that way. It's just kind of an impulsive reaction. You get to kind of, as an actor and as a man, my third eye is on, which is unfortunate. I can't help, even in interviews like this, you finish a question and you start to think back on what you just said. And that self-awareness is what I think keeps you plugged into the social expectations, and it also kind of, it just kind of keeps you chained to some degree by your environment. And I think someone who is this extreme sociopath has none of those chains, and it's just kind of, he's just firing and not looking back. And so I mean, there was kind of, I mean, maybe the lack of
if you had a year to prep for this, or 5. I interviewed Jake Gyllenhaal for End of Watch recently, and he said, I took 5 months, and I did ride-alongs with the police. He plays a police officer in the movie. And I did ride-alongs with the police. I did this, but maybe this is a different thing. It's because there isn't that amount of time that it's just purely an instinctual.
Sure, I suppose maybe.
I may be pushing this idea a little bit.
No, not at all. I mean, there's certainly something to be said for over-preparation. I mean, I wonder if I had too much time, I could have gotten inside my own head. Maybe that third eye could have taken away and diluted what I ended up bringing to the role. The fact that I'm not a sociopath, the fact that I am equipped with a third eye and a self-awareness could have diluted the freedom that the character needed. I hate to admit it. It doesn't make me sound very good, but I think there's a lot of me on a daily basis that does kind of think crazy things. You know what I mean? Well,
look out the window here. I don't know if we're sitting over a street, but, there's probably traffic down there. Now, I often think when I'm in the middle of it, or if I'm in a situation like this where you're looking down there, like, what's to prevent somebody from just going, fuck it, and veering out into traffic?
I think that all the time. Yeah. Crazy things. I can see, I'll just see someone carrying, what if I just fucking knock this person to the ground? Just crazy things. Sometimes I think, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it'll be disturbing, but there are a lot of times throughout my day that I just think about doing certain things, and I don't because it's socially unacceptable. But it really wasn't too hard to kind of get into the frame. I didn't have to reach as far as thinking about the impulse to do extreme things. I got plenty of impulse to do extreme things. I just had to think about not stopping.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of, well, what type of person even wants to do those things? I want to do those types of things. I do. I don't necessarily want to kill people, but I don't know. I imagine it being a slippery slope. I imagine the first time you unchained your inhibitions, it would be an addiction. And I'm sure even Prange didn't start out killing somebody. He probably started out doing something else that was liberating in terms of his social restraint, and then found a liking, became addicted to that sensation, and it ultimately became this kind of complete disregard for human life because it was just completely freeing.
Right. Or if you didn't get caught, there's no repercussions. You're like, well, whatever, I didn't get caught, so I do it again, and I'll maybe go bigger next time. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating and kind of scary, right? To try and get into the mind of something like that, of someone like that. Yeah. Were you able just to let it go at the end of the day?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I still have strange thoughts. I still think the things that I think throughout the day, but I'd never act on them. At least not now.
Yeah. Well, I feel safer that way. Chris, thanks so much, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.